In this episode of SENSimilla, we'll be talking to the co-founder and brand director of CannaCurious Magazine, a platform dedicated to women that focuses on the many ways cannabis can enhance their lives. Our guest today is also the head of marketing for FlowerHire, one of the country's largest recruitment and advisory services dedicated to the cannabis industry. I cannot wait to learn how she keeps all these plates spinning. Tekisha Harvey, welcome to SENSimilla.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Good. I'm glad. I need that excitement because I've been on the phone with Verizon literally for 3.5 hours today.
Oh, lovely.
So I'm running on anger, frustration, a couple Monster energy drinks, and no, I haven't had breakfast or lunch yet. So
oh, no.
Pure adrenaline, baby.
I would say pure adrenaline. Let's go.
I'm very happy to have you here just because of, well, for many things. We share some professional verticals. We do some of the same things. We do things in different parts of the industry. And like I said, like that balancing of plates that you have going on right now is especially interesting to me. So let's get into it. Can you clarify first and foremost? So your expertise is sort of in brand and marketing a specific brand, which is something I also do, right? We do it on the creative side and digital marketing side of things. Can you explain to me, for once and for all, Tekisha Harvey, what the hell does brand mean?
Oh, dear. It's super interesting because in marketing, sometimes people can conflate the two or confuse the two and think that they are the same. I think the brand it's its own thing. It is the emotions that you feel, the attachment that you feel to a product or service, right? That is the brand, and it's also the look and feel of it, right? So it's the tangible and the intangible. Marketing is then taking that brand and talking to a specific audience with it. So I feel like marketing is the brand needs to be established first, and then marketing is just pushing it out to the right audiences using various tactics.
Totally. And still, this is such like a ethereal, very nebulous kind of concept, especially, and we'll for sure talk about cannabis too, but like your background is actually helping very large, established, hugely profitable corporations kind of reimagine some of this thing. So one last question, and this is so important because in Vermont right now, the adult use market opens in like 9 days or something like it's
wow.
Like, next week or something like that. So CannaPlanners has been like just straight out with creative work for Vermonters who are, entering the legal marketplace. I think the barriers for entry in Vermont are just the way Vermont did it, just like we do. The ways in which we do everything are a little different. The barriers to entry for cannabis licenses is like nothing, it's like, wow. I don't know, $200 or something. It's very inexpensive. It's just a filing fee. So right now we have all of these Vermonters who are, trying to figure out, oh, I got my license and this thing happens pretty soon. Like, what's my brand? And right now the education thing that we're driving home ad nauseum right now is, no, your logo is not your brand.
It's not a brand. The logo is not a brand.
Take me through it.
Well, so given my past experience, one of the things that I feel like I've learned and honed my marketing skills in, and by first and foremost working on some big brands. So I've worked at Coach when they launched the Signature C, which was huge. And then I worked at Ralph Lauren, which is an iconic brand, and learned so much about. One of the things that I learned there was like, Ralph Lauren is not in the business of fashion. He's in the business of style. He's like, if you're in fashion, you can be out of fashion, but if you can continue to evolve and grow and develop your own style. So and then also I worked with ConAgra brands and, on the big brands like Chef Boyardee, Marie Callender, Healthy Choice, Hunt's Tomatoes, and just really learned about that the brand is more than the logo. It's about what you stand for. It's about who you're trying to serve. And how you do it, right? So are you doing it with a smile? Are you doing it with seriousness? Are you doing it with humor? Those are all part of your brand essence. And when you think about a brand, like if you think about Nike, people always think of, aspirational, just do it. Like these shoes are going to give me the power to do it. So
I just put up my Jordans in frame, but then remembered that my feet is like 4 feet behind frame. So yeah, I'm picking my leg up, but no one can see what shoes I'm wearing right now. No.
P.S.
Jordans.
I don't own Jordans, and I want some high top Jordan 1s right now. That's like my birthday gift to myself next month.
Do it. Go for it. I bought my wife I am, my closet is full of them. I thought maybe my wife and I could, we don't share any fashion similar, except for like we wear all black and that's basically it. So I got her a pair of Jordans, and unfortunately they're awesome. I wish they were my size. Like I would rock them. But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off with my trying to.
I know, because we love. That's the thing. See, you get excited about a brand, you have associations with it, and so
you have a relationship to it.
Yeah, those are the connections you want to develop. So before you just start with the logo, I always tell my clients or people I work with, like, take a step back and say, like, what do you stand for? And how do you want to come into this space? Like everyone, speaking of Vermont, you saying it's very accessible and easy to get into the cannabis business. But how is your cannabis brand going to be different than, the person next to you? Exactly. And that is where you start to think about your brand.
It's so, and you're so right. So like, I always use the sour diesel just as the example. Like every grower has that strain that they think is like, numero uno. It's the greatest shit on earth, whatever. But you're right. But what they don't know is that that's bullshit. And, their competitors all down the line maybe have that same strain, and, maybe it's better or worse, but the way that any of them are going to gain customers is not by like how, fire their product is.
Right.
It's going to be like, what is the relationship they're trying to build with those customers? So here's one thing I hear constantly, and let me play a little game. Let's just see how on the same page you and I are. I'm going to be the brand strategist and you're going to be the client.
Okay.
Tekisha, who is your customer?
My customer is anyone who likes weed.
Ah, you did it. You fell for the trap.
I know. No. I didn't know if you wanted to play like the real customer or how the customer, the client,
the real.
Yeah.
All right. Now let's take a step back. So that is we hear that all the time. Who's your customer? It's everybody. No, it ain't. It's not. No. Okay. So what is the real answer to that question? And I guess maybe the better question is like, how can a business person be introspective enough? Because this is not an easy thing. When you're trying to figure out, who you are, like who the hell knows who they are as a person, never mind as a company. Right. So I'm curious, like, how do you get to the bottom of that? What kind of things are you asking businesses in order to think about this differently? Because, maybe for Hunts, it's, we're red, we're tomatoes, like bingo, like that's it. But
all
it's
natural.
Yeah, it's way more than that. So how do you kind of deal with that? Because I know when I ask, I don't ask that question anymore. My creative team does, but they still get that answer. And I know that they're rolling their eyes.
Yeah, I try to walk people through a couple questions. Like, first of all, people are very afraid of leaving people out, right? Like they don't want to exclude groups. So they're like, that's why they want to talk to everyone. Yeah. However, when you're trying to talk to everyone, if you're not talking to one person, you're really not you're not connecting with anyone, right? So it is, and the other thing I always tell people, when I worked on, I interned at Campbell's Soup and I worked on Chunky. And you remember all the Chunky and this is like 10 years ago.
Oh yeah. Like the football player moms.
Right.
Yeah. I still remember it was like Brett Favre's mom or whatever.
Yeah. So that brand really targeted male consumers. But guess what? 50% of the consumers of the product were women. So this is what I tell people, even if you're going after one group, you're still going to have a halo effect to other people, but really drive home that connection to who is it that you most want to serve. So first of all, who are you? I kind of even would go there first. It's like, who do you want to be? How do you want to show up in the space? Do you want to be the light and lovely brand? Do you want to be the all natural brand? What's your angle? And then once you figure that out, you start seeing, okay, who are people who think like me, or who can identify with these brand characteristics or things that I'm putting out there. So it really has to start with, and I go back to that, like you're talking about people, the introspection. It's like, who do you want to show up as? Especially as an entrepreneur and you're starting a business, you get to make all the decisions. You know, no one's just telling you, hey, we're targeting XYZ. You get to determine and decide how your brand shows up in the marketplace. And so it is going through that step process of first, like, take a step back. I give them those examples of, like, you know, it's okay to not talk to everyone to start. It's like, it's like a tree, get the foundation right before you start building all the branches.
What do you think comes first then in that case? Like, is mission more important than, like, I feel probably product to your client, to you know, to our clients, product is the most important thing, right? Like, that's, they might come into a brand strategy session or a rebranding or whatever it is, you know, really hammering the importance of the product, which, yeah, sure, like, that's why that's the catalyst for the brand, that's the vehicle for the brand. But what do you think is more important? Is it the product or the mission, kind of, in how they want to portray that product?
Yeah, if you're looking to build a brand that connects with consumers, they're going to connect to your story, your why. So that goes back to the mission. Like, what is it that, or how do you want to show up in the space, right? And why?
Yeah.
You know, if you want to do it. So, for example, CannaCurious, we are an approachable, trusted source for education on cannabis and CBD for women. You know, and those words are meaningful. Like, we want to make sure that we're approachable, because cannabis is hard. It's confusing. Totally. CBD as well. And so it's like the approachableness that we have, it's a through line in everything that we do, in the language that we use, in the photos that we pick, in the way that we communicate. Even myself and my co-founder, how we're approachable people. So it's like, and that was an extension of the brand. It's like, I want to make sure it's not like we're super premium and untouchable, you know. So I really think about the mission, like, what do you want to accomplish in general? Because there's so many makers of everything, right? There's a bunch of makers of different jeans, right? But why do you buy Levi's versus Joe's versus, you know, Wrangler? I don't know. They're still around.
I was about to kick my leg out again and show you my Levi's, but no, it's not in frame. So I'm, you know.
No, I always say there's room for more. There's room for all. So you can pick a lane and you're going to find an audience that's going to identify with you and then grow with you. And then you can expand after or later, you know what I mean? But start somewhere strong and have a clear definition of who you are, because you want your audience to be able to play back to you or to others and be your word of mouth advocates, what you stand for.
Totally. There's this, I don't know if you're aware of Chris Do, but he's a, you know, he has a huge social media presence. He runs an agency, I guess in California somewhere, called The Future something. And a message, you know, he's just one of those, like, rise and grind kind of social media dudes, but he's also a creative. So it's a little soft, you know, he's not Gary V.
Yeah. Okay.
But he is like a artsy version of that. So he has, you know, one of the things that he always says is there's, no matter what you think, there's room in any industry for you. It's not necessarily the widget, the jeans or the pre-roll or whatever it is. It's that message behind it and how powerfully and succinctly, like, you can deliver that. Right. And part of that is, like, you know, I would say obviously words are as important as kind of the visual components, but all these things play into it. So just to take one more small step backwards, the cannabis, so coming from, you know, kind of working with Campbell Soup and, you know, like all these big name companies, fast forward to kind of now, where the cannabis, and, you know, now you're working with cannabis brands, and the, you know, the industry itself is so nascent, you know, it's been around for a blink of an eye. It feels like forever, but it's been around for the blink of an eye. So this is obviously a generalization, but a lot of people entering the industry don't necessarily have maybe the same business background or business experience or broad understanding of kind of this brand thing. So how are you explaining this differently to them versus like how you were explaining it to maybe like a board of directors or like, you know, a marketing team for a Fortune 500 company?
Yeah, I think it goes back to just bringing people along the way and accepting and honestly being humble at the hard work it took to even get the industry where it is today, and then coming in and saying, I respect what you've done, and here's how we can be even better. Because as the industry develops, this is what I started actually in the cannabis industry working with a consumer insights company that was, it literally came in to say from traditional CPG to say, hey, you're going to need to segment your consumers. You're going to need to understand their need states, and it's going to make your products better. And it's also going to make your marketing better because you're going to actually be connecting to their true desires, right? So I have used that story and that line too, to kind of bring people along. Is the industry, like you've said, it is so small. I was at a marketing conference last week. So it's like Gen Pop. And I'm so used to being in, cannabis circles. And I realized like so many people are curious about cannabis and still have no clue. They may have heard a little bit of something. So the industry has super growth potential. And so it is really just letting people know that it has this growth potential. It's going to develop, and there's different customer segments. They're going to have different needs. And the way that we grow is by developing a segmentation strategy or a brand strategy of how we're going to and who we're going to go after. Can
you just explain real quick a segmentation, like a segmenting strategy?
So basically, you're going to have more than one consumer that you may go after. So for example, I'll give a cannabis example. So there's different need states around like why people use it. So top 3 reasons: pain, trouble sleeping, anxiety. So if you're developing a product, you know that those are 3 needs that people want. You can segment your customers into those need states by, okay, I'm going to create a product for the people who want to sleep or people who have pain, or you can segment your customers by how they're using it by demographics such as age or psychographics, like based on like lifestyle. So people who who have, so a demographic might be income, right? So people who have a lower income or medium income, you want to make sure you have opening price point products, right? If you have, we focus on CannaCurious on women. So it's like, what are the products that women are using? Are some of them, or is there a segment of population that is newbies and they want lower dose products? And so that's how you can start to look at your customer base and segment them based on how they're using it, what they're using it for, and then tailor your marketing innovation to those different segments.
Very interesting. This is like what, my marketing calls, internal marketing calls, like this is almost all we talk about. So it's like we have, databases of lists, thousands and thousands of people, license holders in our case, in various stage of either pre-license or, actual operation. And the needs of those people, while we can definitely accommodate, A to Z for any of them, are wildly different. And moreover, like the way that they as consumers are trying to maybe do their own due diligence, like do their research into, in your example, whatever cannabis product in mind, like, digital marketing for cannabis companies. So we have to like tailor our message for, pre entrepreneurs to, long-term MSO directors of marketing, with multiple C-level bosses, that sort of thing. Like, and it's wildly different messaging. It's all the same message. We just kind of tailor it a little differently, but that's for sure an interesting thing. And I love that example of, like recognizing, because it goes back to what we were talking about. Like everybody wants everybody to be their customer. And while like on the onset, that's like an impossibility, you can tailor your brand for, and the financial demographics, the easiest one. I can have a, top of the line, super expensive product, and I can have that same product that's, maybe packaged a little differently, a slightly different branding for a a more affordable, audience, that sort of thing. So it's a great example. I got you right into the weeds immediately, and I didn't mean to. I usually like to do a little bio first.
So who am I?
let's do that. Let's take it back. So you had a pretty, a fairly long career before getting into kind of like the freelance thing, the independent contractor, the 1099, which you also did for a long time. So can you take me through that, like the setting out on your own as a contractor?
Yeah. So in 2017, I retired from corporate America. I call that July 28th was my retirement date. And I just was burnt out and I needed to take some time off. So I knew that I was burnt out. So I started saving a couple years prior to be able to like not work for a year. I just wanted to like be okay, be comfortable, and not have to think about anything. I started traveling and met some amazing people through a travel group and realized like there's so many different ways that I could apply my corporate knowledge to startup businesses, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs. And so I started just basically cultivating or creating like programs or ways that I can help. And it was really with foundational branding and marketing strategies. And how did I find my clients? I first and foremost, I created a website. I had a friend do my website, and I was like, how do I position? And I was tweaking over and over again, like, how do I position my services so that it makes sense to the audiences that I want to serve? And then just really start putting the word out there that of what I was doing and asking people for referrals if they knew someone. I did a project for free just to kind of build my portfolio and also to kind of like test out like what the process could be like, and to because at first it can be very time consuming. You think it's like, oh, I can knock this out in a couple hours and I can charge $1,000, like, and then you end up spending like 15 hours and then you're like, oh my God, I'm not making enough money.
You're giving me PTSD, by the way.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm giving myself PTSD. But basically that's how I started. I worked at a co-working space to put myself in an environment with entrepreneurs and people who were either doing side hustles or trying to transition from corporate America, to just be in that space and that energy of entrepreneurship. It also provided me support, in terms of people doing different things, to be able to collaborate and, cross-pollinate and do projects together with other folks. And that's really how I got in. And then I got into, through my working at my co-working space, there was a large CBD company that was, their sales team was there while they were looking for permanent office space. And they were looking to get into major retail. And my previous role was I was a shopper marketing director, and I had contacts at all major retailers, grocery, drug. And so I ended up doing a project with them. And that's when I really got into, from the CBD into cannabis, because I was like, wow, they really, like you mentioned earlier, there are people coming from all different backgrounds. And so they didn't know, like, okay, this is, how you present to a buyer at CVS. These are the types of things that they're going to be looking for. This is the plan you have to present to them. You can't just say, here's the pricing. They're going to know, how are you going to support the brand once it's on shelf? And so I helped them with that. And from there, I was like, I'm in. I want to be in this industry, because I could see the opportunity for to use my past experience and apply it to building a new industry. And that's one of the things that motivates me, is like being impactful and helping to problem solve. And so something I'm like, oh my God, don't say that, because there's problems everywhere. I like to solve them. And then I just keep going after making new projects.
Hey, as many problems as there are, that's employment opportunities for you, right? So God bless. It's cool to hear you say that, because it's actually not an uncommon kind of theme in this show, which is maybe I thought I fit somewhere, but then I realized that I was actually supposed to be doing this. I brought it up way too many times in the past couple of podcasts, but I'll bring it up again on this one, which is one of my guests on a previous episode said something that like punched me in the face, with just like how controversial but like simple. So he said to me, he's like, you don't want to do what you love. You want to do what you're good at. And if you're lucky, you can incorporate what you love. And I was just like, oh my God, like this whole time I was like, when trying to plan out where I fit into the kind of emerging cannabis industry, and this is, almost 10 years ago in Vermont, it was like, do I, plan to open a store? Do I, do a CPG? Like maybe I start CBD farming. And then I was like, oh yeah, you actually don't know how to do any of that shit, Will. You suck at farming, like you kill plants. You worked for Apple for 5 years and you absolutely hate retail. So no. And it was like, oh, it's, for me, and it sounds like you relate to this. It was like, oh, I have this skill of whatever, I don't even know what it is, but like, let's call it sales, right? I have this, maybe a small amount of charm. I'm a good salesperson. Like I can have a conversation, I can move a deal through. Cool. Like, how do I do that? Like, what am I going to sell? And for me, it was like, oh, just the same thing I've always done is sell, customer service. Going way back to the beginning of this conversation, like our brand was customer service, and then kind of fitting in, like, I want to be great at customer service in the cannabis industry. And our vehicle for that is going to be, visual elements of a brand, or, creative assets or websites, digital marketing, like stuff that's been around since the dawn of, capitalism.
Yeah.
So like, it's good to hear you say something similar, which is like, I had this skill, and then I saw this cannabis thing happening, and they were also like, next door in the shared office space.
Yeah. And then there's the layers keep getting more and more, because I also found that cannabis is a space where I was able to bring more of myself to work, right? Like I didn't have to deal with the corporate politics of dress and, just expectations that I personally feel are not needed. It's like, do you do hard work? Do you get things done? Do you know how to deliver?
Just
Those
the corporate
priority
bullshittery that you'd been dealing with.
Yeah. And it's a weight. And
9
it's
to
like,
5. Yeah. It's a total facade, by the yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right.
Right. Like, and it's not needed. And I found that the cannabis space, they're like, look, we have a lot of mess we need cleaned up. I don't care what you wear, just get shit done.
Yeah.
Like, so
it's crazy to hear you say that, because like I had a huge I worked for Apple for many years. So like, find me something more corporate than Apple. You know what I mean? Like, they're the most corporate. My wife worked for Fox forever. Same thing on the media side. Like, find me something more corporate. But in sort of starting CannaPlanners, I relate to what you're saying, which is that stuff is not like, there's aspects of that are important. There's aspects of that maybe like can add or detract to company culture if you think that that's an important thing, which I do. But that stuff was it wasn't important. It was, right. And not to regurgitate Gary V, but it was the hustle. Like that's what's important. Can I deliver on this thing that I say I can? Yeah. Cool. Let's keep going. And I'm going to wear a t-shirt and J's like all day long.
Right. And I'm going to feel like myself doing it, with my tattoos and everything.
Yeah, totally. So as my company kind of grew and I started hiring people, I was hiring younger people away from corporate jobs. And I'm like, it's like teaching a dog new tricks. Like, I'm like, yo, you don't, like, I'm cool. Like, work when you got to work. You don't need to tell me you're going to the dentist today. Like, I actually don't give a fuck.
You're like I don't care.
Yeah, I don't care. Like, you're an adult. Go do what you got to do.
It's amazing what happens when you trust people. Let people know you.
Totally. Yeah, they're like, oh, I feel empowered I don't feel like a child. Like, yeah, man, like, do what you got to do. You want to go on vacation? You're getting married? Congrats. Like, go.
Yeah.
You don't need to request time off. Like, go do your thing. Even kind of the constructs of the 40-hour work week. Like, I'm the company owner, so I work 100-hour work weeks.
Right.
But I still recognize like how important it is for employees to have boundaries and be like,
yes,
and that's weird. Like, my employees aren't used to that. They're not used to that.
We have to detox from and it's so funny.
Brainwash.
Yeah, this is why I love cannabis, because we're literally changing people's minds about a federally illegal substance and saying, hey, we're sold a lie. And so honestly, like that is part of my life progression, is like not question everything. I don't believe in like everything is a conspiracy, but sometimes at some points you have to question, why do you believe what you believe? Is it still necessary to believe that thought, right? So, and that is how you break into it. It's part of that self-reflection that I think a lot of people were able to do when things slowed down with COVID, if they use that time, to actually self-reflect and say, how am I showing up for myself in my life? Is everything going how I want it to go? Do I really like this? And then, empower themselves to perhaps make a change or start to make a change. Because I know change is hard. But you had to take a step back and be like, why do we have to show up at 8 a.m. when I work? What if I work, 10 to 2, and then, I work again like 7 to 9, because that's what works for me. As long as the deadlines are being met or the work is being done and there's understanding, it's a weight off your shoulders that you used to have to worry about. I remember working in corporate and having like some days I just didn't have anything to do, really. And you had like Microsoft, the what is it? The chat function. And if you could only be away for like an hour, and then it would go from like green to, and I would just be like on my couch and just like touching the button,
moving your mouse.
Right. And be like, I'm still here. No, like it's crazy.
Yeah. No, it definitely is. Even hearing you say that, like, oh, I just had to move my mouse to make it so my manager thought I was doing something. Like,
I was still here in case. And I'm like, this is crazy. When
I feel for like logical, and maybe I don't know, maybe I'm full of shit. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I feel like I have some like a slightly logical brain, or maybe pragmatic. Like, I'm more upset about that. Like, you don't need to pull wool over my eye. Like, do what you got to do. Like, I'm not tracking you like that. This isn't, 1984.
And it's amazing. It's amazing what happens. So I also, like you mentioned, I'm head of marketing for FlowerHire. I've been with them for just almost a year, and it is a progressive environment. We are pretty much all distributed across the country. People of I feel senior in my age, but so some people have not worked in corporate settings, so they don't have all the hangups. But then others have, and but it's been amazing to see what happens when you allow people to show up as they are to do the work, and you focus on the work, and you focus on the human being, and understanding that we are more than just what we do. How much harder people actually work, and because they're like bought in, and we're like a family. It's kind of, I still can't believe it. I feel like this is weird, but because I just have it, 16 years of working in a completely different environment. It's still kind of weird to me, but I like it. I enjoy it. I enjoy the people I work with so much. And I never had that before. And we're doing hard work in cannabis. As you know, it's not easy. There's regulations changes. There's lots of different types of barriers. There's resistance because you're dealing cannabis. And I had someone today I was talking to about the magazine, and he was like, oh, he had a little health cafe, and he was like, oh, I can't have that in here. I can't have anything to do with cannabis and CBD. And I'm like, it's a magazine. He's like, no. And I'm just like, there is still that resistance. And so it is good to have an environment where people can show up, support each other, work hard, have a good time, share all your life, your pets, your kids, your dogs, I love it all.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I totally relate. Like, I feel like cheerleader is a big part of my job, because I don't know if you can relate to this, but like, it's really easy to, keep the blinders on. And because you're right, like we're overworked, underpaid, even me, overworked, underpaid, like all this stuff, only because there's a greater good here. And for us, it's like, we're building this company that hopefully will be around for a while. But there is a sense of cheerleading. Like, I've gotten really good at it, every huddle, it's like, we're going through and recognizing, milestones or, great work, because the customer service thing really is the most important part. And if we're not kind of delivering on that, because whatever, fill in the blank, I'm not recognizing, great work when it's done, or like whatever it is, we're not making our employees feel whatever. Like the end result is the customer service,
deteriorates.
It deteriorates.
Absolutely. You're going back to your point about mission. Values is another part, like your mission, vision, and values. Those are like the three components to start your branding. Like what are you setting out to do? What's your vision of who you want to be? And then what are your values? Because the values are going to be like the how you show up. And one thing that I really love about FlowerHire, we have our core values are community, authenticity, gratitude, and execution. And those are like my personal values. Like I'm all about gratitude and people and collaboration but I'm also about getting shit done. So the execute, I'm like, oh, roo, ha, ha, but I also deliver. Ultimately we're here to take a business from X to Y. And we do to really drive that culture. We have our weekly team calls where we literally give value shout outs to people on the team. So from the past week, you look at, okay, who do I want to give a shout out to that has exemplified community values or gratitude values, so we live those values. And that's what has developed and created the culture that what I've seen is then that translates into how we interact with clients and candidates, because we're helping people get jobs in cannabis. And we do it in such a way that people they really have an affinity for us because they can feel these lived values. They're like, oh my God, they're real people. They care about my career. And literally the people on the team really do care about getting people jobs in cannabis, because they're like, you can feed your family. It's not just about, oh, I get this commission check. It's about like, you're literally helping people advance and find satisfaction as a part of their lives through what they do. And I'm like, wow, that's like a big deal.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. For us, our mission statement is normalizing the emerging cannabis industry through creative design and powerful digital marketing solutions. It's super corporate, but also like exactly what we're trying to do, which I feel like, is something that FlowerHire. Yeah. And going to kind of your point before about when you were shopping around the magazine and the health food store guys, like, no, weed, like we're through our companies, through the people we choose to hire, and then the way that those people kind of, speakerphone, yell out into the masses. That's how you're going to get into that, health food stores. Like the more education and our job is mostly education, like we're educating our potential clients through, our sales process and teaching them what brand means and all that stuff. But our strategy with them post-launch, like their own digital marketing, their own kind of messaging is mostly education. I would say it's like 80% education versus like, everything else. Like, so educating people not only on their products, but like what are cannabinoids, what is cannabis, like, don't be scared, undoing all this stuff that I'm sure that health food store dude is like going on and, he's like, dare, it worked for me, whatever. Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. So like companies like mine, companies like FlowerHire, like those are, doing the good work and really like destigmatizing a lot of this by getting people jobs or, just through education.
And we do the educate. That's what essentially CannaCurious is, an educational platform. We're educating.
Well, let's get there. Yeah. We're getting back into the weeds here. So I want to go back to the contractor and kind of talking about maybe some of those challenges in those early days. It sounds like, you were able to hustle, you figured out how to, networking was one of your biggest tools in those early days. So I'm just kind of curious about what other challenges, stick out in your mind in those early days.
Yeah, the biggest thing is finding clients, honestly. And people have asked me about transitioning from corporate to kind of freelancing or independent contracting. And I said, that is the one area that I think people don't necessarily put enough time or consideration into, because you're used to getting a paycheck every 2 weeks or once a month or whatever. And now it's client based. And so it's like, or project based. And so continuing to have like a pipeline of people or businesses to work with. In the beginning, it's a challenge because it's like you're starting to build the momentum, and it may take a while before it starts, the referral network kicks in or people know about you. So that was one of the biggest challenges for me, was finding the right clients on a continual basis, but also finding clients. I realized that solopreneurs were not even though I have a heart for working with them. They can't pay because they can't pay because they're bootstrapping. And a lot of times they don't have the team to execute on what you're asking them to do. So it's like, it's all well and good to say, hey, I developed this brand strategy and marketing strategy for you, but they're wearing all the hats. And so they may not even be able to execute what you're doing. And that kind of made me pivot from working with kind of solopreneurs to businesses that were at a point where they needed to get to the next level, right? So they were already operating, they have some consistent cash flow coming in, and they're looking to get to the next level, and they need my expertise to help them do that, right? As a fractional, CMO or a independent contractor. So that was one of the biggest learnings I had from starting out initially is making sure refining that sweet spot of clients and having the clients that have the ability to pay. Because and then I created some things, because I do like to give back, and I created some things that were free or were, that I can, give and share knowledge to the solopreneurs, but conserve my time for really kind of the people who are actually able to pay.
Yeah. Wow. Like what a way to be self-aware, and this, we kind of touched on this right in the beginning about like, who's my customer? Well, it's everybody. It's not. And it sounds like you had to kind of go through it a little bit to figure that out. I mean, I totally relate to that. Like we, gave shit away for free forever, before we felt confident. And I think it's defeating maybe that inevitable imposter syndrome, like that feeling of like, I don't belong here.
Right. Who am I to do this?
Yeah. Look, I have a portfolio now, and now I'm worth whatever dollars.
Yeah.
So was that in addition to like the kind of self-awareness of seeing that for yourself? How did you accomplish that? Was it a matter of just changing messaging? Did you jack your prices way up? Like a little of both?
A little of both, right? Because there is, I think, the imposter syndrome coming in of like, can I charge this much? Like, I don't know. I can't charge this much. But then you get into a point where if you're not charging enough, people don't take you seriously either.
Totally.
And so you have to find that sweet spot. But the learning about changing my customer target really came about. I mean, it's life. You're like, hey, I need to make some money. This isn't working. So I got to pivot, re-strategize. But the big learning for me was the combination of, like I said, it was not only that did they not be able to afford the certain level of service that I was providing, but they also just couldn't take it and act on it. So to me, it was like, then I'm not really actually being useful to you. So that's where I was like, this is not the sweet spot of where we have an equal exchange of value. And so it's like, I actually need to work with different companies. But the only way you're going to learn is by doing. You can listen to everyone's advice, but at some point you have to just get out there and do it and learn. And that's where you're going to find the most insights and also the ability to pivot. My ability to pivot is so strong right now. That muscle is like, it's been trained. And so it's like, especially working in cannabis, like, oh, my payment processor kicked me off. Okay, what am I going to do next? Like, we just learn to find, to game plan, to change your game plan and refine it. And you get that experience by doing.
Yeah. It's a little bit, it's doing and also exercising what for many people is an impossible skill of learning to say no. It's a fine balance of lots of things. Like, no, I'm not going to do that because this is actually paying the bills, or whatever. So
that learning to say no. I joke with the CEO of FlowerHire all the time. I'm like, my no game is strong. But it's a skill. Like, even, it's not easy all the time.
It's hard, especially for salespeople. Like it's the hardest skill because, I'll just bring it in-house for us. Like, I pay my sales staff well, but the majority of their paycheck is based on the deals they're closing. And we have this motto that mostly exists in the sales department of CannaPlanners, but definitely applies to everybody, which is the number one unwritten rule of CannaPlanners is don't fuck your team over. And like that always starts with sales. So if if a sales team member doesn't have the ability or to say no because they're fearful of like how that's going to affect their their income or whatever, like you have to, as a manager, you have to learn how to balance those things out and again empower those people. Like same kind of learning lesson with my corporate employees who actually are the same people, but it was like like don't bend over backwards to close this deal. Like no, like don't, like if you're bending over backwards, we don't want that deal. That customer will end up costing us more money than we'll make off them. And man, talk about something that makes zero sense to livelihoods. Like they're like, what?
Don't turn down money? What?
Don't close the deal. And actually, this was something that I learned at Apple, because I was that way at the beginning. When I started working at Apple, I wanted to sell the most computers, the biggest computers, like the most expensive shit. I wanted to sell that. But it was like I very quickly was taught that no, like first of all, these things sell themselves, so don't worry. Like you'll sell that expensive machine, but for this customer, like you actually have to like listen to them and figure out what they want, and maybe even tell that customer, no, you don't need that. You actually need this, and you can save yourself money. Like whatever. It's a huge lesson that and it's so important because you don't want to fuck your team over, because what happens is like that pain in the that pain client goes through the they're touching all the employees.
And they touch everybody.
Oh my God. Now everybody
like
has to eat
with a snotty nose touching everything. Like you're like, oh, we all sick now.
I feel like the label agency, and for anybody listening, I'm air quoting that, agency gives kind of a false sense of security, in that like agency sounds like there's an army behind me of people who are whatever. So I'm kind of curious how this played out for you. I think that like we're able to, if we're on a client call, I have 5 other of my team members there, like maybe making suggestions to the clients, trying to figure out what the solution to X problem is. I'm curious how you dealt with that, because you're an independent contractor. So you're a single person. You're working for some of the biggest companies in the world with presumably the biggest egos in the world, and also like presumably large in-house marketing teams. How did you deal with personalities, and kind of how did you make sure that you were heard?
That's a lot. I have a support system of you can say a network. Like you honestly, like friends who are experts in what they do as well, to like be able to bounce ideas off of. And they literally helped me to see the talent that I had. Like, okay, you've been working for a long time. Like you aren't starting from scratch. Like go back to projects that you worked on within a corporate culture and see, like, I literally had to write this brag book, which is basically just an account of all the amazing shit I've done, so that I could remember it and see it. Cool. And that helped me to build my own self-esteem, to be like, oh, you've done this before. Look, you did this, because we don't remember. We just do things and just move on.
Yeah. I love that. A brag book. That's great.
Right. It's amazing. I probably need to update mine now, but just keep a document of all the things that you've accomplished that you're proud of. And it can be in all different types of areas, but that helped me remind me of who I am and what I worked on. Like I worked on big campaigns and I know, and I'm like, I know my shit. A lot of it came from me. I think self-esteem comes from yourself.
Okay, let's talk about this real quick. I'm glad you brought this up, because that's not something like, so my experience with self-esteem is maybe slightly it is definitely the fake it till you make it thing. Like, I'm a confident person, not too many hardships growing up. Like I am fairly sure of myself. I know I'm not an idiot, basically. That's where that was the extent of my confidence, right? Maybe 10 years ago.
Right.
But then going through this, I don't want to call it an experiment, but this social experiment I put myself through, it made me because of what I'm talking about, like I wasn't, I was taking things personally, like, right. So like even being able to like receive feedback from clients or whatever, like it's hard to swallow that sometimes because you got a big and little ego who are telling you that you're right. So for me, it was definitely contrived. Like I was for sure faking. I definitely put on a CEO mask, like, I definitely stood a little taller, but then like, and it was fake and I knew it was fake. I'd leave a meeting and be like, oh my God. I'd like undo the tie and like take my shirt off and be sweaty, be like, oh God, that was terrible. That was a nightmare. But now it's real. Like now it's actually real. It actually it manifested into like this real feeling, and people buy into that stuff. Like if you're confident about yourself, people see that, and that's reciprocated. They then feel like you will be confident in how you undertake like what I need you to do for my brand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was there a point, like, do you relate, like beyond just the fear of like striking out on your own? Like that's, that you have to gain some confidence from that, but it's hard to have maybe you're not as self-aware, or maybe you were more self-aware than I was at the time. It was like just striking out on my own, or even signing the first couple of deals, while it was like monumental and I was so like the gratitude was like overwhelming, the confidence was still fake. Was there like a moment when you were like, oh, I'm not faking it anymore? Or were you ever? I don't want to put.
No,
I don't know if you were. But.
I used to, you say fake it till you make it. I used to say fake it till you feel it, because it's like
even better. Yeah, even better.
Eventually you will feel it, right? But then I was 100%. Like, I don't know. I adopted this other philosophy of just, I think it's like, I'm just human, and I'm amazing at certain things and I'm not so great at other things, and both are okay. And that like humbleness, if you will, of being real, it has definitely helped. It's like, hey, this is how I can help you. This is what I know. I can't, like when people come to me or ask about digital marketing, I'm like, yeah, that's not, I don't do that. I don't like, but what I say is, you know what, actually, before you get to digital marketing tactics, I want to know, what's your brand like? What's your mission? Who's your audience? Because you need to know all that and have that solidified before you start going into the tactics of like, oh, I want to do a paid search ad, or I want to do, and so part of it was just like it gave me confidence to admit what I didn't know, because then I wouldn't feel like an imposter. I'm like, I don't do that. And it's either like, I know somebody who does, and I can refer you, or I can say, you know what, this is what I see you actually potentially needing first, right, and kind of go from there. And
I actually am an expert.
That mindset is like it. So it made me more confident in what I know I can do, and stop trying to be like branding. We talked about everything to everybody. Like I'm good at this. You want me for this, but for that I can send you to over here. I'll send you to Will and CannaPlanners because they have you.
That's our clip right there. What came first, FlowerHire or CannaCurious?
CannaCurious was born in the pandemic, September. It was born, we started in April 2020 and had the first magazine September 2020.
So let's talk about that. Was there, you're not still, obviously you're not still contracting for other larger brands. So what, talk me through that, like winding that down, or maybe like the experience that was like, I'm done.
So I was working with the Cannabis Consumer Insights kind of startup. And when the pandemic happened, we were doing in-person product testing in Colorado, California. We were doing focus groups. So a lot of in-person things. And then so that business kind of dried up. Yeah. And then I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And what I learned through talking to hundreds of cannabis consumers and patients was that people were using this plant for wellness. Like it wasn't about getting high. What I also learned was no one was really talking to the grown-ass woman like myself, about it, to teach me about it. Because I'm only 4 years in. Like I was like, oh no, that's a drug. Now I'm like, no,
You're all in.
I can see all the benefit. I use it every day. So if my mind could be changed with the truth and education, other people's minds can be changed, other women. And so then thinking about my target audience, I'm like, who do I want to talk to? People like me, because that's who I know the most. And my business partner, she actually came up with the idea because she was consuming, I guess, CBD cookies. Every parent, she's a parent, and the kids were home, and she'd always worked from home. She's a graphic designer, creative director. And she was like, I'm going crazy. And so she was like, but the CBD helps keep me calm. And she's like, but people don't understand it. And I don't want them to think it's a drug. And it's like, well, we're like, how do we teach women that this is not a drug, or this has benefits that they can use, and then just give them the information. And we worked together on projects from design. She's done decks for me. And she was like, well, why don't we create a magazine? And it was like, I had the marketing cannabis background. She had the design background. And literally, again, we were in a pandemic. We're like, what else is there to do? So we started it, and we figured we could start it ourselves because we had the capabilities ourselves, and we just contract with some writers. And I just had, brand connections, and that's literally how it was born. And
so it was just like the independent contractor life stopped.
Yeah.
You and your creative director were like, let's do this.
Yeah.
Wow.
And and now it's like, oh my gosh, I think before that I had started another business. Like it is a little bit addicting when you see
sure.
opportunities and you're like, well, no one's doing it. And you're like, well, I'm not going to wait. Like, let me do it. And if it's in your will, it's fun and it's exciting. And I think it's not about the outcome as much as it is the process. And for me, it was like, oh my God, I did it. And that part of it is, I have strengthened that muscle to be like, oh, there's a business opportunity idea. Like, don't wait for anyone else. At least if you put it out there, you say it, trust me, people will be like, oh, you should talk to this person, or you should connect with this person. And then next thing you know, you have all the tools you need to kind of get started.
So I started my company while I was working somewhere else. I'd been working for this other company. I was a punch to clock. Not really, but I was a department director for a digital marketing agency for many years, and saw an opportunity, was at a time in my life where I was like, I'm done with this bullshit. Like, I'm working with young idiots and I'm smart, like I had that ego was like eating me alive inside. But really it was just, I was yearning for my place. Really, it was a personal journey. One thing people never, probably very rarely ask themselves is like, what life do I want to live? And so I was starting this company around the time I was being introspective and asking myself this, and the answer was really like, I want to live my own life. So just to bring it back to kind of what you're saying there, like that idea of, so anyway, what are we getting at? Like, I was working somewhere else, knew I was not destined for that life. And lo and behold, I wasn't. I was actually fired from that job. And, pushed off the cliff of entrepreneurialism. Yeah. So you're doing it kind of the opposite way, where you've got this company you're trying to run, and you go get a job with FlowerHire. Okay, so this is the part that's like, oh my God, I have my anxiety levels for Tekisha are going through the roof. I hope she's okay. I hope she's able to do this. It's a lot. Talk to me about that balance, or at least maybe recognizing the opportunity with FlowerHire while you're doing this other thing.
So it came to be serendipitously. I was at a cannabis event on South Beach and met a recruiter who worked for FlowerHire, and we connected, and she's like, yeah, let's schedule a call. And I'm thinking, oh, she wants to like hire for CannaCurious. She doesn't know, like we're like, the team is like 4 people.
It's you and your co-founder.
Right. And anyway, we get to talking, and then she's like, you know what, are you interested in coming to work for us? And I was like, huh? And I hadn't thought about it. And then it started the ball rolling to having more conversations with them. And what I really liked about FlowerHire was it took some of the pressure off financially, obviously, by working again. It literally hit all these goals of what I wanted to do. As I laid out my map, I wrote 2 years ago how I want to live my life, as you said. And I said, I want to work for somewhere where I don't have to dress professionally. And I don't even like that term, because professionally is not about external. It's about internal, but we've made it external. But I don't have to, I can basically wear whatever I want. I can work wherever I want. And I have a small team to coach and develop, because I love teaching and just helping people like clear the path for their own, progression.
Mhm.
And so and also I felt like I wanted to go back into a space where I could make an impact based on like what I've learned. And it just so happened like they were hiring a head of marketing and
Bingo.
right. So it was like, oh, you can't ignore the signs. And when I met with the team, it was just like very human centered, very much about positive human emotion, because this work is hard, like you said, but understanding that this is part of our lives. I think no company ever really, really means it when they say, that they don't, that they care about your entire well-being. I just felt that. Right? They're like, did you show up and do what you did? And I just thought, so it hit all these boxes for me. And in addition, it was in cannabis. And I was like, I had the skill set of being, traditional marketing, cannabis experience, as well as entrepreneurial experience. And, the cannabis industry, it's you have to be flexible and adaptive and a self-starter. And so it kind of just aligned. And like I said earlier, like the value systems were like my values. So it just felt like it was very serendipitous. And they knew like, hey, I have this magazine. I'm like, I don't have to hide it. It kind of is a marriage. Like it all goes together. My contacts benefit them, their contacts benefit me. And I'm dedicated to helping the business grow. And I also like come from a consumer marketing background. So doing B2B marketing, I did a little bit with the consumer insights company, but it was a new challenge for me. And so, and that's part of like, I think entrepreneurs typically like challenges, like, and I always say I can walk and chew gum at the same time. So it worked out. Yeah. I'm just not, and I just like, every 7 years, I feel like I change careers because it's like,
okay. I think that's pretty normal. I think that's pretty
normal. It's like,
yeah.
And so, and I like the acceptance of like, I am more than one thing. I think that's what really drew me in, is I felt like working in corporate, I was always kind of put into a box. And then when you're doing stuff for yourself, you're like, I can be whoever I want to be. I can try this product. I can try this project. I can, and so that was what was really attractive, and how they all work. Like you were asking before, like, how do I make it all work? I don't know.
It does. It just works.
It works because the work is like, it's just energizing. So it does feel like work. When people are like, oh, it doesn't feel like, yeah, it does. But I also can take breaks, so.
Well, it helps coming into a company that's funded, that's also like maybe established and funded, because it kind of alleviates some of the stress of startups like mine that are like, very cash flow conscious.
Yeah.
So beyond just like, was there, beyond just like the employee, the benefits of being an employee for someplace that you felt a vibe with, like what was the kind of opportunity that you saw? Was there like something you were like, oh, that's, I'm going to be the head of marketing for this company that's blowing up right now. Like, here's the value, here's the actual value that I can lend FlowerHire.
I'm the first marketing hire, full-time marketing hire. So like,
I
run the show.
It's been a great interview.
No, that was very exciting and challenging at first.
It went from zero, basically like organic style marketing to now you were there.
Yeah, it was because it fit. They were like, we need to go to the next level. And I was like, we need someone with the expertise to help us get to the next level. And so it fit. And initially it was hard because there's no marketing person above me that I can go to say, hey, is this right? Is this what I should be doing? It's like,
yeah, these are your problems to solve.
Right. And so that was initially was like, oh my God, like, I don't, I had to
still have ownership. Like,
yeah,
you still have ownership over, that aspect of the company, that still entirely rests on your shoulders to solve those problems. So or even find out what problems to solve.
Yeah. And that could be a good thing or a bad, because, you get all the glory, all the blame.
Yeah. Yes, I can relate to that. Yes. I usually take all the glory and I push all the blame to,
But no, I could care less about the glory. I like external glory. I mean, honestly, I do know it goes back to like you were saying earlier about you build that self-confidence of you seeing the work that you're putting out there, how people react to it. And, like, hey, I did that. I'm helping to move this business forward. I'm helping to move this industry forward. And that is, that's a bigger reward to me than just, the pat on the back or of, hey, that was a good job. I mean, it's useful that, but
that's a big difference from where you came from too, being a 1099, like you didn't have that,
Yeah.
And I can relate to that. In those early days, it was just me. And like, I'd win a contract and I'd throw myself a high five or something and that'd be it. Yeah. Like, great job, Will. Thanks, self. but now, not that the gratification or the, adulation is necessarily why we get into this. It for sure helps, but it's like, that's a night and day situation from, where you were. You're able to celebrate these wins in a far more meaningful way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So FlowerHire is kind of experiencing some tremendous growth right now. What are you doing right for them?
Ooh,
it's all you. I know it is.
I mean, it's a lot of content creation, honestly. It's like with CannaCurious, I'm educating, women consumers on cannabis. At FlowerHire, we're educating the job market on the opportunities that the cannabis industry can offer. And so a lot of what we're doing, and that is content creation, webinars with industry insiders. We have a talent in cannabis feature where we basically highlight the people that are doing amazing work in the industry, and that and in all facets, not could be growers, could be cultivators, could be people on the data side, but basically trying to humanize working in the cannabis industry, just like consumers still need to kind of shift the mindset. Those same consumers also work at corporations and we're trying to show them and showcase to them like how the cannabis industry might be for them. Like I don't think it's for everyone, for sure.
No.
It's not easy, like we say, but we did a survey.
It's not easy. I didn't say it was easy. Did you say it was easy?
No. We did a survey.
You see this beard? He used to be red.
Oh, yeah, you'd be like, yeah, it ages you. But most people work in the industry because they have some connection to the plant. And that is like the number one reason. And so I always tell people too, and they're looking to come into cannabis, I was like, the people who succeed the most have an entrepreneurial spirit. They have some kind of connection to the plant or a passion for the plant. I don't think you have to be a consumer, but you can't think it's a drug. No, it's not going to work for you. Working in the space. And I say you have to be scrappy. You have to be willing to be a coach and a player, and not have an ego about. Yeah, you're like, listen,
I love that.
You can't be.
I'm gonna put that I'm stealing that, and it's now part of my job interview.
You're gonna be a coach and a player.
Yeah. I love that.
It's so true. Like, you have to be humble and say, oh, something needs to get done. Like, yeah, I'm on the ground doing it. Oh, I have to post I'll post it. It's not about ego and saying, oh, well, I'm at this level and I don't do that. There's no room for that in cannabis. So I'm really excited about the work and the content that we've created to help humanize the industry. Again, the education piece, as you mentioned, it's important. And I think that's what a lot of us are doing right now, just helping people understand what the industry is, what it's not, but more importantly, how we can shape it to make it better than past industries.
No doubt. I don't want to cause any trouble with the fine folks at FlowerHire. Is there a reality where CannaCurious totally takes over your life?
I mean, that is the plan.
I know it already is taking over your life. But I mean, is there a reality where that becomes your full-time job?
Yeah. So CannaCurious is currently self-funded, right? We have not sought out external funding for a couple reasons, like basically wanting to maintain control, also just continuing to refine and build it out, to what we wanted, not wanting to rush. And so, but there is going to be
taking that same sort of approach that you did earlier, which was, and not selling yourself short or anything, but it's like, you're validating the idea still, you're still building content, you're still understanding who you are, then those $1 million ad contracts.
Right. We're still building community actually, and support, and just really in that awareness stage. We have a great product. We want to build more awareness, build more alignment with the right partners, and go from there. Yeah, I mean, I think again with FlowerHire, I think they're very clear with anyone who works in cannabis. They're like it's people move around. We're seeing it ourselves, because one day you're a client, the next day you're a customer. I mean, a candidate, right? So people move around. So yeah, it's not like in a corporate, we're like, what's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? Like, I don't know.
No, 5 minute, 10 minute.
Right.
Yeah.
Do people still ask that question? Like, what's your 10-year?
Yes, definitely. Oh, for sure. I mean, we even ask it like to the extent, it's 1 year, 2 year.
Yeah.
But it's, for us in understanding kind of their goals, because depending on that answer, like we then know whether or not they're a right fit. It's like, well, I'm here to crush it, or I'm here, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going to be. Like, okay, we got to have at least some idea of where you want to go. It's not where you're going to be, but where do you want to go?
Absolutely. Have that vision.
Hell yeah. What, just to wrap it up, I'm curious what big things you're excited about that you're working on for FlowerHire, and same question for CannaCurious. What's kind of the, if you could boil it down to one thing for each that you're super stoked on, what is it?
For FlowerHire, it's events, creating community with the talent that's in cannabis at events. Yep. We've done 4 this year and across the country, and they just bringing together the cannabis community. We have November in
like
Boston.
job fairs or job fairs, or
just like happy hours. We did a ski day in Colorado. Oh, cool. We did a last week in Chicago. We did a yacht cruise at the end of Benzinga. So basically creating the spaces to bring the cannabis community together. That is exciting. And we've been getting a lot of really good feedback on that aspect. And for CannaCurious, we're launching our next issue in October. Mm-hmm. And I'm really excited. It's always fun. It's a lot. That's why I was like, it's a lot of work to launch an issue, but it's always exciting to see how it comes together. And I'm really excited about that. And just continuing to go on and move on and grow. And we're also launching a monthly newsletter with CannaCurious, so that right now we produce a magazine in the fall, winter, and then the one in the spring, summer. So in between that, there's so many opportunities for content. We're going to do a monthly newsletter where we'll be sharing, one fact-based story around, educational story. We're going to get into psychedelics, talking about and educating about that for the psychedelic curious. I don't know if that's a word, but then also like personal stories, like sharing the stories of all different types of women that are using cannabis and how they're using it and why they're using it, to just help normalize it, so that people can see themselves reflected back to them. So those are two exciting things that are happening on both sides of my brain.
I love it. I love it. Events and education, keep pushing it. Tekisha Harvey, you've taken us through a good portion of your journey, and I very much appreciate you sharing your story with us. The only thing left to do is to tell the listeners where they can find out more about what you've got going on.
You can follow me personally if you'd like.
Yes.
at Tekisha Harvey on Instagram. And then you can follow FlowerHire at FlowerHire, or go to flowerhire.com. We have lots of great content on there. Like I said, our blog, we put out something new basically at least 3 times a month. And then CannaCurious, it's a long name, I know. CannaCuriousMag.com or at CannaCurious Mag. Sign up, join our newsletter. We don't spam because I'm the email person.
Of course you are.
And I'm the marketer that hates to be marketed to. So I'm always conscious of the levels, right? And making sure it's quality content, not just I'm just sending an email to send an email, right?
Totally. I'm maybe a little guilty of that. Tekisha Harvey, thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I've been your host, Will Reed, for SENSimilla, brought to you by CannaPlanners. We will see you next time. Bye.